board somewhere and called me and said, I want you to read. Do you know about this lady's technique? I said, I didn't at the time. I said, no. And, or maybe I did, I don't remember. Anyway, he said, I've got a copy of her book. I'll send it to you. Read it, and when you're through with it, we'll do a session.
Right.
I got like a quarter of the way through her book, and he calls me up and says, I can't wait. I want you to do it now. So he comes over to my house. So I need to back up. So what happened was he found out about a book that he claimed every single person who read the book committed suicide, killed themselves. So it was a book about how to manifest things on earth through whatever means. And so he read the book, and then he got in this very negative state of mind. He said he couldn't get out of it, and that's how he, what I just told you, all that stuff transpired. So he came over in my apartment at the time. It was fairly dark in the apartment itself. And when he walked in, he looked totally black from head to toe as far as all the color. There was no colors anywhere in his clothing or anything. He sat down, we had a session, and after it was over, I was on his right side, and after it was over, he said that the left side of his face was contorting, but I couldn't see it because I was on the right side, which wasn't contorting. And so nothing of any note happened in the first session. And then he paid me, and then he came back a second time. And during the second session, he said he would. We went through the whole scenario, or the whole thing, but what happened was he saw some type of morphing energy thing in his head, and I assumed that was the attaching spirit. And then after he saw that, he saw this Venus flytrap, and it came at him, and it ate the morphing energy blob in his head, and then it disappeared. And I didn't know if he was cured or if it was worked or anything. But he called me days later and said, yeah, it worked. And then he called me weeks later and said that, or maybe months later, he said that within a week or two after the session, he said he started laughing, and he couldn't stop laughing for like a day or two. And he got more copies of her book, and he started doing her technique on other people. And he said he had to go to when he went to churches. He said he couldn't tell the preacher because the preachers would stop him from doing the work that she did and wouldn't let him do it. So he had to approach people behind the backs of the preacher and pull them aside and say, hey, let's do this work. And he would do it on the side, and he was getting success. He got more success than I did. And anyway, that's the whole story. But I thought it was worth telling you since you asked.
Oh, thank you, Charles. Yeah, that was interesting.
So, tell me, keep going with your, you can go literally in any direction you want. Ghosts, demons, aliens, paranormal, whatever area that you have an interesting story to, it doesn't have to be yours, it can be anybody's. If you have an interesting story to tell, go for it.
Okay. I'd like to go back on Mount Shasta because there was one more incident that we had at Mount Shasta when we did a paranormal investigation over there. Sylvia Brown, which you've probably heard of.
Of course.
Yeah, Sylvia Brown's secretary, Holly DeLauder, was with us. She was one of our HPI investigators. And as we were doing the investigation at Mount Shasta, Holly did something very unique. Well, Holly claims that she is psychic, and I believe her. She goes, Paul, take my picture right now because there's something behind me. And again, I didn't see nothing out there, and I snap a photo of her, and right behind her is a disc-shaped UFO tilted right behind her.
You were outside.
Yes, we were outside, yes. And that was just totally amazing how she knew there was something behind her. And also, too, with Holly DeLauder, we used to go to serial killer victim sites. And we went to the Leonard Lake Charles Ng serial killer where the cabin was located at. I can't think of the town right now, but
that's in California also?
In California.
Go ahead.
And they actually burned down the cabin. And we were actually able
Smart people.
Oh, yeah. We were able to locate the cabin through Holly DeLauder, who happens to be a psychic medium.
Right.
And at this cabin is where Leonard Lake and Charles Ng brought their women. They brought women from the bars. They brought prostitutes over there. They would tie them up, torture them, videotape them as they were being tortured and assaulted. And they found something like, I think something like 60 videotapes, VHS videotapes of them torturing all these women.
Right.
And Holly DeLauder, she did another psychic thing, and she goes, Paul, take a picture at this area. And I take a picture, and there's this mist. It was a tall mist. I would say about 5'4".
Ectoplasm?
Yeah, ectoplasm. That's what it could be. But I believe I took a picture of one of the victims, who's now a ghost. So It was this height of a 5'4" person, and it was all misty. So that was kind of unique.
So have you ever worked with people who help other people pass over during your investigations?
Oh, sure. As for myself, my nickname is the Demon Warrior. And people who have attachments, I will provide them with a full submersion baptism. And when a full submersion baptism is a basic form of exorcism.
Sure.
And I definitely believe in angels. There's angels out there trying to protect you, to watch over you, and stuff like that. And I pray for these angels to help this person who has a demonic attachment. And when I first started doing it, I didn't know if I was going to be successful or not, but I said, what the heck, I'm going to give it a shot. And I started getting these phone calls of people who had demonic attachments, and they said, Paul, your baptism worked. I no longer have this attachment. It's been lifted.
So you have done exorcisms? How many have you done?
Yeah, exorcism minor exorcism.
Still an exorcism.
Yeah. I've done probably maybe 100 and something baptisms. I also too do a Roman Catholic house blessing. So if they ask me to go ahead and bless our house, I do it, and I do it with holy water. So now you have a cross, and I go into each room. Some of the rooms I do a four winds prayer. I send the demon to wherever he came from. I place the cross over each room, and my Roman Catholic house blessings are, I would say, 80% successful. There's that 20% that are not, because either the client goes back to whatever they were doing, messing around with the dark arts, enticing, inviting that demon back into the house again. So, but yeah, about 80% successful with that.
So you've done plenty of exorcisms of people through baptism, and you've done exorcisms of buildings as well. So you are a I could say you're a very minor exorcist, but the numbers wouldn't make, even just because it's a minor type of exorcism doesn't make you a minor exorcist. If you're successful hundreds of times, you're a major. And if you can exorcise a dwelling, I think there are probably a lot of priests who have done exorcisms of people who would not try to exorcise a building, because they have the belief that only people can be exorcised, not dwellings.
Right.
To go on, tell us more interesting stories.
Charles, have you ever heard of living ghosts?
I don't think there is a such thing as death, so everything is alive.
Okay. Living ghosts, and we've actually experienced this in our investigations. But I'll give you a case example. 1974 in Chicago, Illinois, this couple moved into this house. And around about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, they would see a man manifest and walk over to the couch. And over on the couch would manifest a woman. And he would start repeatedly striking her. And then they would just fade away. Well, this happened about 3-4 times in this house. And on one particular day, they had a block party. And the host of this block party says, yeah, we do this every year. And this is our photo albums of photographs of our block party. And so the lady starts thumbing through it. And she gets to this one picture. And she goes, oh my God. She goes, those are the ghosts in my house. And the host looks at the picture and he goes, ghosts? What are you talking about? He goes, yeah, they did live in your house. The police were there all the time because they had domestic disputes. They're now divorced. The man, the husband, now lives 5 blocks down the road, and the woman lives out of state. He goes, but they're very much alive. He goes, I'm still communicating with them. So how can they be ghosts?
Okay, so I understand what you're talking about now. So if you the journal what's it called? There's a journal that's been around for like 100 years in the United States and 200 years in England. The Journal of Parapsychology, something. That's not the name of it, but I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But it's called, what you're talking about is called, or at least the way what they called it, and what it is it's an out-of-body entity of a living person. So what you're seeing is that person manifesting non-physically in a different location than they are physically at. So I've seen that myself, and how did it go? So I was coming home. I was living in Houston in my either late teens, early 20s, mid 20s. I was coming home from somewhere. I don't even know where I was coming home from. But I was driving outbound on Memorial Drive, or not outbound, outbound away from the city center on Memorial Drive. and I went, started going around this sort of high banked left-hand turn, and I was in a very strange mood. And instead of getting up on the higher end of the bank in my lane on the right side, like we drive here in America, England, they're on the left side. Okay, instead of doing that, I was driving my Pontiac Le Mans down the center of the road. So the center of my vehicle was on the yellow line or white line, the intermittent line. I was driving half in my lane and half in the oncoming lane. I just passed Bunker Hill Police Department, which I've been in that jail too. Anyway, I just passed that jail, and I was taking this high banked left-hand turn, and it wasn't very high banked. It was a little bit high banked, but not much. Anyway, so I'm taking this left and driving down the center of both lanes, not in my proper lane, and I saw this. It was a two-dimensional human, and a lot of ghosts are two-dimensional. They're not. You can't see through them. They have width and they have height, but they don't have depth. It's like they're on a flat surface. Okay, and the ghost I was telling you about a minute ago was like that. So anyway, this guy appeared from the knees up, like he was standing in the middle of my hood outside over my engine, and he was solid. I couldn't see through him. I had to look around him to see where I was going, and because he had some width there, and it was kind of from a strange angle. I was looking at him as if I was hovering above his head, right in front of him, like maybe 2 or 3 foot in front of him, but above him, and looking down on him. Okay, and the only thing I could see besides him was a intermittent yellow or white line going at a 45-degree angle up into the sky. So I was looking down upon him at the angle I was looking at him. And so I could see him for, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds at the most. And then he disappears. And then I start thinking about this really quick. And I'm like, why did I just see a guy walking down the middle of the road? And I'm thinking, well, maybe there's a guy walking down the middle of the road on the other end of this corner, wrong curve. And so I slow down, I get in, I go up into my lane, fully in my lane, and I come out of this curve, and there's a guy standing right in the middle of the road on the yellow line. And I passed him, like, I must have missed him by about an inch, 2 or 3 inches at the most. And went right past him, and I slammed on my brakes. I looked back, I could see him. I pulled over, I stopped, I looked back, and I kept seeing him standing there. He was solid, full, real, live human, and I just seen an out-of-body version of him that was had no 3-dimensionality. It was only 2-dimensional, and it was an out-of-body entity of a living person, just like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to you. Tell us another interesting story.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of interesting with that case because, it's residual energy that has been impacted into the atmosphere and it replays itself over and over again.
So you think that's different? That's different from what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's different, yeah. Because there's negative energy and even positive energy that will impact the atmosphere and replay itself over and over again.
So you think those people lived in that house at one point?
Oh yeah, the host actually said that they lived in that house and they had domestic disputes.
So it was residual energy.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm talking about is, as they say, an out-of-body entity of a living person. And what you're talking about is residual negative energy in a given location.
Right.
So you're familiar with locations where very negative things happen, and then it kind of creates kind of almost like a black hole where all kinds of negative things happen in that one spot. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, yes.
Have you ever investigated one of those?
We have, well, we did an investigation at Evangeline's, which is a costume shop, and on the 3rd floor, late at night, the employees working at the shop will hear shuffling of feet. They'll hear like disco music. They'll hear people laughing. And it's positive energy because back on the 3rd floor, back in the 1970s, it was a club called D.O. Mills. And it was a disco club. And that residual...
In the same building?
Yeah, yeah. And so that building, Evangeline's, which is now a costume shop, on the 3rd floor, they still hear disco music, people laughing, people dancing, and everything else. So strong positive energy impacted that atmosphere.
So you're familiar with the movie The Haunting, right? Isn't that the one where Stephen King wrote it for the what's the one with Here's Johnny? That one?
Oh yeah, The Shining.
The Shining, I'm sorry. You're familiar with that movie, right?
Yes.
Have you ever been in that building?
No.
Okay, I was hanging out at that. I was doing some metaphysical work for about a week at the what's it called? The place where that building is at? Estes Park. Okay, we went to Estes Park for a week to do a bunch of metaphysical stuff. And I kept walking past that building. And I'd seen The Shining, the movie. And I kept looking at that building going, that building looks awful familiar. And I did not place it with the movie. And I never did go into the building. But are you familiar with the story that Stephen King wrote? Or not wrote, but are you familiar with how he came about deciding to write The Shining itself? Familiar with it?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so what happened was, here's how I heard it. Now, I'm not saying this is true, but this is what I heard, is that he heard he heard the rumors about that building being haunted. So he went to stay in the building himself, and he didn't stay in the most haunted room of the building. He just stayed in a particular room. It's got his name on it now, called the King or something of that nature. And he had a really nasty nightmare, and he woke up and wrote the book, which the Shining, that the movie's made on, based upon. The next day, like in probably before he left, I would guess he wrote it before he left the building, but that's the story I heard. I thought it was an interesting enough story to tell.
Charles, I actually heard something like that. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, he knew beforehand that the place was haunted. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting checking out that building one day.
Yeah.
There's a place. Let me see if I can remember what it is. Oh yeah. Have you ever investigated anything in Virginia? Or is it Virginia? Yeah, Virginia. I gotta think. It's Virginia. It's not Virginia. It's Washington. Have you ever investigated anything in Washington State?
I've been to Seattle, Washington, and I've been to some locations that where people said that they were haunted. I know I wrote an article about it, but it kind of escapes me right now. I can't really remember what places that I went to. I know that the tunnels are very haunted in Seattle, and I did walk in some of the tunnels, but I didn't see anything. I didn't experience anything. But yeah, Seattle's got
Well,
some history.
the reason why I brought it up is because I had a little adventure. I'm trying to think of the name of the town. It's got an interesting name, but I've got it on my website if anybody wants to know the name of the town. Anyway, there was a town in, I'm pretty sure it's Washington State, but I could be wrong. It Maybe you've heard this story. There's a you know what a snow shed is?